Hi guys, welcome back to LS Vintage Design. How's everyone doing? I hope you're having an amazing day. If you're new, welcome. I'm so glad you found us. If you keep coming back, thank you. You know how special you are. Today we're talking how you can redo your bedroom on a budget and give it a vintage vibe. So why don't we just jump into this video before my dog starts playing. So let's just jump into this video. Okay guys, how can you decorate your bedroom, your safe space, your oasis with a vintage vibe on a budget? There's a couple of ways. You can actually use vintage items. Sorry, had to go get my dog's little ball from him. You can actually use vintage items that you can find for really reasonable prices. You can use vintage items that you find for very expensive prices, or you can use vintage repops. And again, those can be very affordable or very not affordable. And since this is how to redo your bedroom with a vintage vibe on a budget, guess what we're gonna do? So how can you do it? What can you do? And there's a lot of different things you can do. And we're gonna start right here with your bedspread, your comforter, whatever you like, because now there's both. One way is you can go with a modern comforter bedspread like this. This was Amazon, not vintage at all. But you could lay on it vintage pillows to decorate it, or a vintage blanket or quilt at the foot. And it's very easy to find vintage Afghans. This is a vintage knitted Afghan. In antique malls, estate sales, even thrift stores, you can find vintage Afghans. And I like the Afghan because they were hand done. They're really, you can find really good quality, and you can find unique ones. And this was actually mine from when I was a child. My step-grandmother knitted it for me. So I know it's vintage, as much as I hate to say that. And it goes perfectly with what I'm doing in my space now. You could also use vintage quilts. Now, I'm very fortunate, and I have several vintage quilts that were my grandmother's. But if you aren't so fortunate, vintage quilts can get rather pricey, even at estate sales, antique malls. I mean, there is a high markup. So if you can, try to find one in the family somewhere, or, watch your thrift stores. A lot of times you can find them. But if you can't find a vintage quilt affordably, then you can get a repop quilt. They make them now. They look very similar. Not the quality, not the love that went into each stitch, but you get the feel. You get the vibe, which is what we're talking about today, a vintage vibe. Now, the Afghan, I definitely say, put at the end of the bed, have it complement your modern comforter or bedspread. The quilt, you can, if you're fortunate enough to have a vintage quilt, you of course can do the same thing if you have a bedspread or modern comforter that it complements. You can use it the same way as the Afghan. That's awesome. What I would do though is if you have one large enough and that it's really special, it's really, nice, use that as your bedspread or your comforter, because they're so gorgeous, and these quilts deserve to see the light of day. But again, if you get a repop one, do you want it to be the star of the show? If it really looks vintage and it was in your budget and you want it to be, yeah, definitely get it big enough to be the star of the bed. Because remember, when you're redoing your bedroom, your bed, your headboard are your focal points. When you walk into a room, the bed, the headboard, this is what draws your eye. It's the biggest piece of furniture in your room. Even mine, as a twin, is the biggest piece of furniture in my room, and it draws your eye. So I have a very modern bedroom, but again, I can throw my vintage Afghan that was made for me, and it brings that vintage vibe in because of the age of the Afghan. And it goes perfectly with my comforter. Now, what about the headboard? I just talked about headboards being the star of the show, right? Of course. Now, mine's kind of dated now and not one that I really want anymore. I'm going to redo this and I'm going to give it a vintage screen feel, I think. I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to give it a vintage screen feel, or I'm going to do that for our backdrop for filming on this other one over here. And this, I'm going to turn into one of those luxurious old Hollywood, the golden era, the 30s, the 40s, that really gold, black, blingy kind of era, old Hollywood Regency. I might do a very luxurious headboard that is quilted, tufted, but on a budget, which means watching for fabric that goes on sale, buying not real crystals to tuft it with, obviously, but buttons that look like crystals. That's an option. Or I could not use the screen at all and use my vintage plate round squares and make a gallery wall for a headboard. That's unusual and different, and I might do that. I have to kind of balance though, and this is what everybody has to do. When you're doing a room with a vintage vibe, you have to balance it because the whole room's not vintage. Either one, because you can't afford it, or two, because it wouldn't be your style. Now I like hot pink, I like bling, as you can tell from my pillows and my comforter. So I have to kind of think what would look the best for a headboard. The tufted would look really good. I could bring in that Hollywood Regency vibe, and I think it would go really well. The gallery wall headboard, while really cool and kind of bringing more of that earth into my bedroom with the natural elements, doesn't really fit the rest of the room. And I'm going to turn you around in a minute, and we're going to talk about the bigger pieces of furniture I have in here, the dresser and the chest of drawers. Because it all has to be cohesive. And the natural elements on the wall or the tufted kind of don't go with the other vibe I have going. So I'm probably going to take this screen, rip off this covering, and create a 50s type screen that will go perfectly, because I actually have an authentic 50s dresser and then modern furniture over here. And it would balance out because I would have the 50s dresser, which I'm going to show you in a minute, on that side of the room. By doing the 50s like headboard screen over here, then both sides of the room match each other. They both have either a vintage or a vintage vibing element, and it would cohesively marry. Another thing I could do, let me show you the dresser real quick before we move on. That's the dresser. It's a true vintage dresser. So I have an MCM piece here, so I need to bring something MCM over to the other side. And it's going to be probably the headboard, the screen, 50s vibe. So I'm balancing out things that way, which is what you have to do. If you have a big, real piece of vintage on one half of your room, you have to have something on the other side that ties it together. So the screen it is. See, I just solved my own dilemma. Now, something else you could do in a bedroom on a budget. The screen, I already own this part, but even if I didn't, I got this at Home Goods years and years ago. So you can just find, an old screen like this at thrift stores, at estate sales, and rip off the covering. And I'm going to show you the really easy, inexpensive way to make it into a MCM piece. But that'll be another video when we do this. But you're on a budget, right? We all are. So what is another way I could give my room that MCM feel, or not even MCM, say I wanted to do a 70s feel in here, okay? You can always find inexpensive comforters at Ross, TJ Maxx, even Amazon. When they're having sales, you can find comforters on sale. Of course, estate sales, thrift stores, those. If you get them from estate sales and thrift stores, please, please, please do the bed bug safety precaution with them before you bring them into your home. Even before you put them in your car. If you want to know about bed bugs and vintage, just leave a comment down below bed bugs, and I can do a video on how you can make sure stuff that you bring home from thrift stores, garage sales, estate sales do not have bed bugs. Anyway, so what I could do, say I wanted to do a 70s vibe in here. You can find, like I said, if you watch Amazon, find inexpensive on sale bedding. Get a 70s theme. It could be an orange or an avocado green or some pattern that you like. You could even get a tan or a solid green and get that fabric like in my last video and do some trim on some throw pillows. Make some throw pillows for the top and use some trim on a couple of more and just create a real cohesive look. Then you could find a 70s Afghan and throw that on the foot, and you've got a whole 70s vibe going on. But what about the rest of the room then? What could you do? You could add a 70s lamp on the other side of the room. Lamps are a great way to add in the same air as your bedding. Because remember, we got to do the star of the show and then kind of make everything else dance with it. Okay? Everybody else is supporting. Also, paint. Paint is very budget friendly. You could have your 70s bedding on this side. You could do a one wall on the other side, a feature wall if you want. It's not really a feature wall because this is your feature no matter what. But it could be a 70s color wall on the other, and then the rest of the wall's neutral. But then you're balancing something big on this side, something big on that side. And again, paint is super affordable. Like I said, bedding can be, if you watch for sales on Amazon, estate sales, thrift stores, that kind of thing. Ross, TJ Maxx, Marshalls, all of those. Now, furniture is tricky because even at estate sales now, you're going to pay $300 or $400 for furniture. I don't know why, until the very end. And then the cheapest furniture is always the big bulky stuff that you don't want anyway, right? So what I would suggest is looking at antique malls, that sort of thing, if you want a piece of vintage furniture, whether it's the bed frame with the headboard, or whether it is a dresser or a chest of drawers or night tables, whatever it is. I would look at antique malls or people moving that really just want to get rid of stuff. Antique malls you can pay over time. Is that budget friendly? If you can spread it out, yes, it can be budget friendly and you can get a piece that you really like and picked out. Watching people move, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever people moving have that they want to get rid of. I've bought stuff on time from antique malls before, and I think it's a great way to not pay all at once to get a piece of big furniture that you really want. So yeah, I think it's totally worth it. But that's me, and everybody's budget is different. My budget now couldn't do that, but my budget before could. So everybody's circumstances change as well. You can also find bed frames that are not in high demand cheap and kind of give them the treatment to where they will look more like whatever era. And by that I mean if you find a wood bed frame and it's the slatted one, but it's not an MCM one, you can strip all the wood grain off of it and do a light wood grain and you'll get a more of an MCM feel to it. So anyway guys, that's how you can give your bedroom a vintage vibe on a budget. If you like this video, again, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget, leave me a comment down below. What is your favorite time period? 50s, 60s, 70s, the 20s, the golden era, the Hollywood Regency, Art Deco, MCM, you know, what's your style? Let me know. Also, if you want to see a video about vintage and bed bugs, leave me the comment down below. Vintage and bed bugs. Because I will do it. Because there's some tips there that I think everybody should need to know, especially if you're buying vintage beds, vintage linens, and I know they don't sell vintage mattresses, thank God. But, you know, there's still some tricks you need to know, clothes, all of that. So just let me know down below if you're interested. Guys, take care. Have an awesome day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.